The Raven Software interview tour continued a few days ago, now making that since Season 3 Reloaded dropped about 3 weeks ago. 4 interviews that dropped a ton of information about the future of Warzone, from things like quality of life changes to new features and talks of new weapon tuning, map adjustments, and more. There's been a lot discussed in that 3-week span. Now that tour continued as Ted Timmons, Senior Creative Director at Raven, interviewed the Baka Bros over on their stream the other day. From there, we learned a bit more of important information in regards to Warzone's near and distant future, and that's what we're breaking down here today, letting you know everything you need to. So as we go along, drop your thoughts down below on what you think of this information here. Are you liking anything in particular that was mentioned, anything that's changing, or is there something you hope to see revealed in the near future? Whatever the case, drop your thoughts down below. But if you enjoyed the video, you find it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on the video. And if you're new to the channel, do be sure to subscribe button is to with all things Warzone, whether that be loadouts, tips and tricks, or just updates and information like this. We've got you covered. And I mean, we also could be rolling up on the Modern Warfare 2 reveal here in the next month or two, so of course we'll keep you covered with everything you need to know on that front as well. And finally, if you'd ever like to support the channel a little further, using creator code Espresso in the in-game shop of either Warzone, Vanguard, Cold War, or Modern Warfare is an entirely optional yet great way to do so. Don't ever feel pressured to, but if you do, tweet me a picture. I'd love to shout out some of your generous support in upcoming videos. But that said, let's jump into it. Let's start out with some Season 3 talk. Firstly, Ted Timmons ended up mentioning that player feedback is going to be directly affecting some big changes and additions here coming in Season 3. It's rather ambiguous. There's some things mentioned in particular that we'll talk about here to follow, but a lot of that could be vague in general. We don't have all the information here at this, but one place in particular in regards to map adjustments is that Peak actually may be on the potential chopping block. As for what that would mean, we don't quite know again, but he mentioned that this is something that Peak is a great point of interest, but it does affect the flow of the game. So we may end up seeing some adjustments here, whether that being putting some points of interest, filling out the base of that mountain again, like we saw with Factory. We don't quite know, but it seems like they're taking aim at the center of the map here. In regards to other features like that, one thing that was mentioned was portable redeploy balloons. Now, this is something the Baka Bros actually brought up as sort of going along with how we saw portable buy stations recently, but Ted ended up saying that he really liked that idea, but that they can't really talk about that right now. And if you follow any dev non-answers here over the past couple of years, that usually means something is in the works. So we'll see if that comes in Season 3, Season 3.5, or beyond, but it is something that actually may be on the horizon as well. Now, the meta is something that was a big topic of discussion here with this, in which, from both a fundamental standpoint and then also directly talking about some weapon changes, we got quite a bit of discussion here on this. Starting fundamentally speaking, Ted ended up mentioning that Raven really doesn't want to change the meta too constantly, and that it's kind of a balancing act, and one that I personally definitely do not envy having to make. Now, you have to keep in mind that yes, the hardcore players, you and I, and even if you don't play too much, I'll keep it real with you, I'm kind of in that camp right now, haven't been on Warzone in like a week because of real life stuff and grinding out a few other games, but if you're the person to go out of your way, watch content on a game to learn more, to know what's up to date, better your skill, whatever the case, or in my case, to make said content on the game, we're the 1% here. For every one of us, there's 99 others who just play casually and pick up the game for an hour or two here and there, and that's that. For us, we may want to see a differing meta, different weapons come and go, but for the other 99, relearning or in a lot of cases, remaxing out weapons to make them competitive is just entirely too much time. They'd spend their time leveling, not necessarily playing with whatever's the meta. So that said, Ted mentioned this is a balancing act, and that while they want to keep that sort of healthy variance of meta weapons out there, they can't be changing everything every single half season or so. So that balancing act is absolutely one that, again, I don't envy, but that said, when we come to the Bren, absolutely put that on the chopping block. 4 months of superiority, I think it's time. Now, another curious mention in regards to the meta was one that you might not necessarily think about, that being blueprints. The topic of why blueprints change was actually brought up here at this, in which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, there are a lot of blueprints that have really cool aesthetics, but once you customize the attachments to make them a competitive weapon, you lose basically all of that blueprint in some regards. What I'm going to talk about here is kind of a two-parter, one response from the Baka Bros interview, but also another one from a discussion that I was a part of that honestly I'm not sure if I discussed here on the channel yet or not. But number one, from that interview, Ted mentioned that they want to start, for at least Mastercrafts, they want to start building weapons with those meta classes in mind, so that if you get that build, you don't have to change too many of the attachments to make it as competitive of a build as possible, while also still retaining that camo, that custom design, whatever it is that you ended up purchasing here with this. So that'll be a nice, hopefully, change to see here with this. But number two, from prior discussions, I forget who it was. I kind of want to say it was Pat Kelly, studio head at Infinity Ward, who's one of the main overall heads on Warzone. think it was him that was said that the foresight just really wasn't there because Warzone wasn't meant to be a 2, 3, 4, 5-year game. So that was something, the blueprint system, they never really thought of it in that regard. So they had mentioned that they would look into the canvassing issue here with this, where even if you change those attachments, the design wouldn't change all too much. So I don't know when that would happen, if that would happen, but that'd be great to see. Now, as for other meta talk here with Season 3, there is major sniper meta shifts planned right now. The Swiss and the Car are still by and far the best weapons, which means that if you have Vanguard, you grinded out these snipers, you probably don't get any use really out of them. Now, there's no details here on this, but it's, again, rather vague. May bring other snipers more in line a bit, may nerf the Swiss and the Car, may give Vanguard snipers a significant buff, but that is something we're going to see major sniper adjustments here in Season 3. And also, I'd imagine it's in overall conjunction with that rebalancing for other weaponry, given that health increased to 300 HP overall, as opposed to 250 beforehand. But the final thing we'll talk about here in regards to Season 3 is that Ted mentioned other additional second chance opportunities. There's no details on what these will be, but it sounds interesting. For those that don't necessarily recognize what this means, second chance opportunities are like your gulag, buybacks, and also other things like most wanted contracts and such, anything that gives you that second chance to get back into the action after you're dead. So I'm very curious how this will happen. We of course saw that April Fool's mode last week, which offered, of course, no parachute, initial loadouts immediately and everything like that, but also the Mo Gulag sort of approach here to it, where just like last year's Mo Gulag, Mo Problems, where it was infinite Gulag until the Gulag closed. So long as you won your Gulag, you could play, die, go back to the Gulag, win again, go back, die, and you see where that's going. That was introduced again here this last April Fool's event, so maybe we see more LCMs like that. We don't, again, have any details, so it's interesting to ponder. Now, not necessarily talking about Season 3, but talking about other sort of quality of life things, game modes, items, and things like that that have been mentioned. One thing, transitioning from one mode talk to another, BR200 unfortunately kind of got the idea of it returning shut down. Now, that's something that has been a favorite game mode of mine. It's only showed up like twice, I think, since Warzone launched, but 200 players makes for some hectic, high-kill games, and it's awesome. So I would love to see this happen, but Ted ended up mentioning that this is something that right now, with everything packed into the game, 3 games worth of weapons, operators, a whole bunch of utility items, quality of life features, it just hurts stability more by adding 50 additional players on top of the 150 to 152 that you could max see in a game normally. So unfortunately, that doesn't look to be like something that's returning here in the near future. Other modes like the April Fool's event, of course, have been a hit with the entire Raven team, so maybe we see some more quirky things like that introduced. Ted also mentioned there may be some new items coming here at this, or one in particular, where he ended up mentioning that it's important for teammates to be able to ping items like armor boxes, trophy systems, and something else, in which he caught himself before he ended up giving that away. But Season 3 may introduce a new item here with this, where we of course saw with Season 2, we had the new PDS device, we ended up having the Nebula 5 rounds, so it is very possible we see something like that progressing the story perhaps even, but also dueling as functional utility. Now, one thing that was mentioned here that I don't think that we'll see really happen was the idea of kill cams and final kill cams for overall just more deaths, because they don't happen every single time before you enter the gulag, but also a final kill cam for those that win the game. Ted said that that's a cool idea, he'll bring it up, but to me that's kind of a non-answer that doesn't really warrant much, and honestly I think that everything else that needs to be adjusted, fixed, or added, I think that if that happens, cool, but I don't think that should be too high on the priority list. Now, one thing that was mentioned here that's definitely an interesting topic of discussion was a little bit about the anti-cheat, in which this kind of brought the discussion around to that the anti-cheat is always on, it's always being updated, but so are the cheats. When they go out and mention that updates are being made to the anti-cheat, that is a huge red flag to cheat developers that they immediately need to start adjusting things to try and get around that wall that is put up. Now, the anti-cheat is going to be constantly behind the scenes running, and even if we ask for updates, we're probably not on the front-facing side of things going to get Raven or anything at Call of Duty saying, hey, yeah, Ricochet is being updated because of that. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind, anti-cheat is never going to be 100%. I've always kind of equated this to sort of your immune system, where your body can recognize something, can build the antibodies for it, and then block that kind of stuff in the future. The anti-cheat's the same thing. Once it recognizes a cheat, it knows what to look for and can snuff it out, and either outright ban players or troll them like that 0.01 bullet damage troll or the invisible player troll. But if there's a new strain or a version of a cheat, how would the anti-cheat know exactly what it's looking for? Unless you want the anti-cheat cheat to block out literally any and every background application and process and close everything in your system besides the MWEXE, you're gonna have to give the benefit of the doubt the things that doesn't recognize in a programming sense. Only when it's flagged can the cheat system be like, oh, okay, we'll block that entirely now. I know how to handle this. So that may be giving a little bit more clarity here for all of that. And the final two things that were mentioned here out of this interview that I think are worth mentioning come down to Verdansk and ranked play. Now, Verdansk kind of had a bit more of a definitive answer here given to this, where we've talked about how Raven was like, yeah, we'd love to have a map rotation, but that is something that Ted ended up circling back around this time around, saying that there's way too many technical hurdles. Sizing wouldn't allow for both maps currently on base PlayStation 4s and Xbox Ones. Having talked with Raven and other Infinity Ward developers pre-season 2, getting all the information about like crashing data and everything like that, we learned the predominant amount of players are still on base PlayStation 4s and Xbox Ones. Some variation here of that. So to have that expanded sizing, that's something that they don't want to make the game take up your entire console hard drive. So that's something they're not going to really push. Instead, they're going to focus on the health and integrity and longevity here for what we can do with Caldera, prioritizing focusing on quality of life, content additions, and everything like that until potentially Warzone 2. And finally, talking a little bit about Warzone 2, ranked play was brought up where they mentioned that this is not going to be coming in any upcoming seasons, which all but confirms to me that with them seemingly so keen on actually building out a ranked play, that we're not going to see it until Warzone 2. So a lot of stuff here to digest, a lot of new and interesting information, but maybe offering some clarity here into some of the mindset behind the development of Warzone right now. So that's where we're going to wrap it up. A lot to digest, a lot we've talked about. So let me know your thoughts down below. Is there anything in particular that particularly struck you one way or the other? Or is there something that you hope to see in maybe another interview coming up very soon? Whatever the case, drop your thoughts down below. But if you enjoyed the video, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, do be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay with all things Warzone, tips and tricks, loadouts, just information like this, and anything COD related, we got you covered here on the channel. So if you're interested, I'd love to have you in the community. That said, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.